Get up and get out. Get out. Get out.
I have a question for you.
Say Christ is Lord. Say Christ is Lord. Say it. You say Christ is Lord. Get out. Get out. Christ is Lord.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Offensively Accurate, hosted by yours truly, Atlas Thug, aka White Boy D Voice, aka another racially ambiguous groiper, and I am here to tell you Jesus loves you and Christ is King, among many other unfortunate things. I think that might be the new tagline to open in with, actually. I was thinking about that earlier in the shower. Believe it or not, I was thinking of a better way to maybe make it a bit longer. But we have a lot to talk about today. Forgive the glasses, I'm just blind. And a lot of that's actually going to revolve really around just the short order of things that's happened between the events of yesterday and now today. A good bit of that actually revolving around Joe Kent. Joe Kent's been on the circuit, if you will. He's been on the media circuit. He was appearing with Scott Horton. He appeared with Breaking Points, and he also appeared with Megyn Kelly. The Megyn Kelly one, I think, actually has a bit of a point of contention, if you will. Not maybe a point of contention, but I think I found a bit interesting, and it goes in line with what we've been talking about with JD Vance and this protective element. Obviously, House dropped in the information last night on stream that, you know, there's a report now that JD Vance is now potentially eyeing not running in 2028 due to familial priorities, as it was reported. Many other things have actually been occurring, escalations continuing in the Iran war. However, about an hour ago, Trump said that it's winding down. We're about to have all of our objectives met. The war, you know, it's all of these things that we got. You know, we blew up their Navy, we blew up their Air Force. They have no missile capabilities, so on and so forth. And so we don't pay attention much to what Trump says anymore. And if anything, what I would say is this actually tracks. There is a consistency here. And many of you might remember throughout all of the negotiations, many times when it was said we're close to reaching a deal or we're meeting up with these negotiations, they rug pull again. Next thing you know, boom, we're back at war, or they struck some other thing, or they struck this, or they struck that. And so this kind of goes in line again with this idea that, you know, this kind of these negotiations for a ceasefire, forgive me, at least for the time being, are seemingly off the table, just given the way that the United States has carried themselves in these kind of, again, these international negotiations. I think it has set a bad precedent for what many people can expect to experience when negotiating with the United States. And maybe more so than not even just that, I think many people would be beneficial to remember. I think it was not last Friday, but 2 Fridays ago, in order to maintain the stability of the oil prices, they also said, everything's all good, nothing to see here, don't worry, don't look about it. And then as soon as the markets had closed, what's happening? We're bombing, we're striking, or something. It was a smaller story. I'm trying to remember exactly what had happened then. So I think it's more so to maintain the stability of the oil prices. And there was a significant development, particular to Iraq, as it pertains to the global oil supply. We'll get into that as well. So Joe Kent, Donald Trump, the Trump administration, and more pressures on the global oil supply. That's what we're going to be talking about today. I will forewarn you as well. This probably be a little bit shorter of a stream. I actually feel awful right now. I don't know what's going on. Hopefully I'm not getting sick, to be honest with you. Before we get into it, a couple of things. We're going to knock this out real quick. Thank you to the sponsor, NAV Metallurgy. As always, I don't have the light box sitting here. I used to. It was sitting here. It's probably behind me now. But NAV Metallurgy, the sponsor, the singular sponsor of the show, I might add, and also with Zeb Boykin and NAV as well, too. And speaking of, I know he sent me a couple messages. I will reach out to you as soon as I possibly can, brother. I apologize. I just didn't have time earlier today. The second thing would be the Groiper Report will be coming back tomorrow as well. Tomorrow night will be Number 17, the 17th edition of Groper Report. So me and Josh will be back tomorrow night. Hopefully, should be. Atlas Lug TV is incoming, a new channel of mine. I'm going to be getting that up and going, hopefully by the beginning of April. And then for next week specifically, expect more videos and probably just a few less streams. I'll probably only stream maybe twice next week. I do want to get back on track with the video production as well, and maintain the kind of bit more of a balanced channel here. But as we get into this, a couple of the themes, though, we're going to get into the show now. The couple of the themes here, really, there's three here. As we talked about Joe Kent, that's kind of maybe the fourth theme here. But the number one theme is the fact that, well, what's going on? And it seems like there's just literally no idea. No one really has any kind of strong idea. And this is kind of been a broader theme as we've kind of explored this Iran war. But very specifically, like I just mentioned, right? Trump saying we're winding it down. But at the same time, thousands of troops are being deployed overseas right now. Amphibious units here, amphibious units there. The 82nd Marine Airborne, all these different troops being moved and positioned in different areas. And we got the report that the Pentagon, I guess maybe it was a leaked report, but report nonetheless, coming from the Pentagon now is that the options are on the table. Ground options are being explored on the table. And so much so far that now they're so on the table, these options are being talked about to such a degree that some of the things that they're looking at is potentially what to do with the Iranian people once we go in and invade. Where will we send these people? Where will we put them to? What camps can we send them to? So it's obviously being talked about on a much serious level now at this point. And I think many would expect that given the escalation strategy, seeing how it seems like there is no off-ramp as well. And also some other smaller things too, as we'll get into it. But many of you maybe saw this earlier as well. Pete Hegseth was begging more of the military individuals who had basically been pushed out from the COVID vaccination and calling, can I get my white Christians to come back into the army? I think many people will be looking at that very specifically as a sense of this war is seemingly not ending anytime soon. And so we'll take a look at that and what that entails too. But more so with there being no strategy, this is like nobody knows what's going on. It's not just the people at home, but this is also just the international community as well. And so there's some fears going around in Europe, just in the particulars of what's actually happening between the negotiations of Russia and Steve Witkoff, or more specifically, there's a Russian envoy who's been having meetings with Steve Witkoff, and this is giving concerns to Europe. And one of the reports that we got earlier today was that Russia actually offered to the United States, and part of a deal, that they would stop giving intelligence to Iran. But Politico is reporting that the United States has rejected this proposal, but actually that this wasn't even the only proposal, that there's actually been a series of proposals from this Russian envoy to Steve Witkoff in these meetings in Miami. And one of those actually includes this, supposedly, as it was reported by, I believe it was Politico reported this, that one of these proposals was to move the enriched uranium from Iran to Russia. And so far as what we understand, all these proposals have been rejected, but their meeting frequencies have actually, maintained some level of pace. And what I would add as a note inside of that is while we are communicating with Russia on these negotiations with Iran, the Ukrainian peace talks have stalled and also sputtered, from time to time. And I believe even right now, I don't believe there's actually any Ukraine peace talks happening right now. They've been stalled, if you will. And so I think that Europe is kind of looking at this as like a potential for Russia to insert itself in between the United States and Europe. And obviously, I think if anybody's been paying attention to a lot of these Truth Social posts and just the maybe the hesitancy from these other, NATO and European Union countries, our allies, if you will, to not join the United States in with sending warships to the Strait of Hormuz. I think, and you see these Truth Social posts, right? Our NATO allies are cowards. I think there is growing, I don't know how much you would put in substance to that, but there are reports that there is growing tensions and fears from these officials in Europe as this kind of, this potential, injection or wedge is proposing itself. And forgive me, I missed a couple of these from House. House always has some good ones. You only click them on this. Uncle House says that Iran issues an evacuation order for the entire 200,000 strong city of Ras Al Khaimah, the UAE, to citizens and residents in the city of Ras Al Khaimah in the UAE in the United Arab Emirates. Interesting. House also adds, given that this area is being used for operations targeting Iranian islands, the city of Ras Al Khaimah has become a target during the upcoming period. All residents are requested to leave the city as soon as possible from IRGC's evacuation center. Interesting. And so it looks like that's actually what we're getting ready to be. Amphibious Albanian, that's funny. And it seems that's exactly where it's going. So despite all the claims from Donald Trump that the war is winding down, it does look like a tactical ground invasion is getting ready to take place. I know many people are looking at Clark Island being the thing that would be getting seized as a kind of insertion, a surgical kind of precision deployment, if you will, in some way, again, to apply more pressure and also avoid the full-on ground invasion and all the politics that would come alongside that as well, too. And so, in addition to all of this, one of the bigger things going to the oil, I want to touch on this too, because I do think it's important. With the oil prices, again, having the potential, it's just being reported by many of these financial outlets, whether it's the Economist or the Financial Times, whatnot, and even some of these reports coming from the UN as well, international sources, pushing for the potential that oil can potentially get to $200 a barrel. And it will only get worse the longer that there is this non-moval in the strait. So Brent crude, many of you, just to put a grounding here or a base level for people to understand, Brent crude, just before, like in the end of February, before the war took place, Brent crude was trading around $70 to $73, which is more so the international standard. America has a slightly lower standard. I forget what their standard actually is. It's like WIT, something like that. But regardless, Brent crude been trading around $70 to $73 a barrel. And earlier today, this morning, it was around like 103, 104, and it's at 112 right now. But the reason why it's at 112 right now is because, and forgive me, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but Iraq put out a force majeure, I don't even know how you say that, on the foreign developed and foreign produced oil in their nation, which actually slashes their production by around, I believe, anywhere from like 3 to 3.5 million barrels of oil per day. And so that's another huge gap, another huge pressure there, because this is now another major chunk falling away. And again, so the overall production that's been flowing through the Strait of Hormuz in general is around 23. And so with many other countries previously, about a week ago through this week, we'd already lost about 10. So it's dropping down to about 13. And now if you take Iraq, and now if we take this out of Iraq, now we're down to like 10. So now we're below 50% of what's typically supposed to be coming through the Strait of Hormuz. And so just to explain a little bit, this force majeure, right, it essentially is kind of like a clause. It's like an emergency hatch button. It's, Iraq is saying we're doing this because some major event has occurred that we can no longer abide by our contractual obligations. So inside of that, what do you get? Well, you get, because there's a war going on. This is a major event happening outside of our control. We can't abide by these contracts. We have no way of getting our oil out because of what's going on right now. So we're halting production. And so that's going to be a major pressure, because again, you're taking all those million of barrels of oil out. But also when you look at who does it affect? So where does the Iraqi oil go, right? Where does the Iraqi oil go that's being exported that comes out of Iraq that doesn't go to the local residents? Well, it affects two force majeure. That's funny. It affects two countries in particular, and one of them being pretty majorative, and that's China and India. Now, if you note, and now the global oil production, it's typically China imports the most oil, then the United States, then India, and then they have differing percentages, and it varies year by year to different levels like that. But this hurts China, and so about 10% of the oil that China imports comes from Iraq. So it's kind of like a 10% kind of restriction or strain out there on China, and then in addition to that, India, about 17 to 20% of their oil import also comes from Iraq. So this is kind of two major pressures on both India and China, which are also make up two of the top three major importers of all oil. And so this is going to, again, continue to send these pressures on the global energy. And if you're looking at, we already went from 70 to 112, that's like around a 55% increase right now. And I think many of you probably have already seen this on the timeline or on X or wherever you get your information from. All the videos coming out of people paying exceptional prices. And I think it was Georgia, I believe. Georgia, I think, was the first state. I think I've not seen any other state follow suit, but Georgia has currently suspended fuel taxes in order to also maintain and provide some relief of the incoming oil prices, which again goes back to what I said at the beginning. If many of you are confused why Trump is saying that, the war is winding down, I would hearken back to that. And I think that was a way to kind of massage over the weekend as a lot of these markets close, to provide some level of rhetoric that would give stability. However, I would say I think the longer that this war goes on and the more that he continues to do this, the more that the administration continues to do this kind of stuff, it's going to be less effective and it's going to have less a pull on the overall price of oil anyways. The markets won't be looking to what Trump says or the administration says anymore and take it as fact. It's like a representative of what is actually happening in the war. So to reset here again, we just have a lot of stories really going on beyond outside of just the Iran war. One of those, the main feature, I'll get to that in a minute with Joe Kent and his kind of media circuit. But I guess I'll start up with here. The New York Times, along with Nick last night and many other people, calling out Trump for having no strategy at all. There was a specific quote that came from a New York Times article that was published, I believe, on March 17th, so a few days ago. I think today's the 20th, right? Pretty sure it's the 20th. So about 2 or 3 days ago. And then they call him out for a very specific quote, which is this idea that there is no strategy at all. It's clear like no one has any idea what's going on. And so this is, again, kind of this main theme here, which is it just seems like a lot of brute force, a lot of just like scrambling around. And I think one of the best takes, again, going back to Nick, and I think, again, of course, I'm always going to be, referencing Nick, is the United States at this point in time really can't even pull out of the conflict. And one of those reasons for why we can't pull out of the conflict, or we could, but the reason why it would be so negative for us to pull out would be we'd be leaving this conflict with the kind of like a permeating idea that Iran can shut down the strait at will, that Iran has the capability to control global oil prices. And that obviously would be a major change up into the idea of who holds the keys, in these different regions. And so I think for Iran, this is a very bolstering move. And if anything, if you look more to the internal politics of like the IRGC, what does that do as well? Well, that looks to them of going, these people were the ones who fended off the United States and Israel. They're like, okay, but we'll put more support behind these guys. We'll keep pushing for these guys. Like maybe we need to have more deference, I should say, forgive me, for these guys, these hardliners, these people, the regime, if you will. So I think there's a lot of negatives that can come from if America decided that if they just couldn't do it anymore, they couldn't hang on to these pressures, they wanted to just let oil fall back to where it was and pull out. I think that would be one of the bigger reasons why it would be awful for the United States. And also, too, it's hard to really kind of conceptualize or encapsulate what that kind of precedent sets in the international community as well, too. And just the way that the overall, from NATO to the EU to every other country, those perceptions, what does that do? How does that change in negotiations moving forward? And again, going back to the precedent of rug pulling during negotiations, by roping in places like the UAE and Saudi to get them to also, keep telling Iran that we're acting in good faith just so we can buy time to bomb them in strategic areas, I think is a terrible precedent to set, especially if you're the one being defaced as the, the supposed world power, if you will. So what we also have, too, in an escalation is that the BBC reported that the United Kingdom and Britain, or whatever you want to call it really, is going to allow the United States to use their bases to also be able to strategically strike. We also have another report circulating that the White House plagiarized its reason for war, or reasoning, or justification, I should say, from FDD. Now, if you don't know what FDD is, the FDD is the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, I believe is what I'm saying correctly. Yeah, FDD, Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And so I saw this from Shoe on Head. She just simply quote tweeted this. It seems like it's being pushed by some guy named Zachary Foster, but it does look pretty legitimate. But the claim is that the White House copied word for word their justifications for with Iran from this Israeli think tank, which the Foundation for Defense of Democracies is a think tank that's based in Washington, D.C. It's pro-Israel. It's been pro-war with Iran. It's been lobbying that for many, many times, many years, I should say. And as stated by, who is it? I have it here in the notes too. So Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs, Sima Vaknin-Gil, has stated publicly before too that the FDD does work in conjunction with the Israeli government as well as the Israeli ministries. Now, who's behind the FDD? Well, it's pretty easy. It's the usual actors, right? And it's, it includes like the Adelsons, Paul Singer, Charles Bronfman, and many others of these of many of these similar faces you have seen, many of these Jews and these Jewish individuals who have donated to these kinds of think tanks before. And then very specifically, who is, you're thinking about like, who is Paul, right? Who is Sheldon Adelson? Who's Miriam Adelson? Their connections to Donald Trump as well. And it does not look good. And so it does look like a word-for-word copy. I'll go ahead and put it up on screen for you guys to see here, because I do think this is one of the more important reports that's coming out today. And as far as my understanding, I think it's down here too, that the White House statement to justify did release on March 2nd. But just to give you guys an idea of what it's looking like here, you can see that these very specific reasonings here, right? These previous instances, if you will. And then if you cut over here, this is from the White House. Okay, so here's the White House, November 7th, 1979, 1983, 1983, 1984. But if you flip back to the FDD document, it is the same thing. And so this thread is posted by Zachary Foster. He threads out through the majority of the document, and he shows you side by side about how it is almost nearly identical. Now, Sam Parker with a great tweet here, showing exactly who is funding this, right? Bernard Marcus, Paul Singer, Sheldon Adelson, and then you have the Bronfman over here. And it's funny because the bigger ones who are so used to seeing everywhere, like you can tell Sam Parker didn't click on because like he's looking at who the other people are as well. That was pretty funny too. And like I had said previously, right, works in conjunction with the Israeli government. And so it's not a good sign whatsoever. But shouldn't be shocking to anybody if you've been following any of the other major developments in this story as well, because I mean, of course this tracks. Of course this is Trump is listening and taking his information from the Israeli intelligence sources. And I think this was a push by many people, especially early on, which was if all of our intelligence reports from whether you're getting it from Tulsi Gabbard or otherwise, it's all showing that there is no push to enrich uranium. It's showing that the religious fatwa is still in place. Many of these are things that Joe Kent has said while he's been on the circuit as well, that there's no evidence, no assessments even come along that even indicates anything's changed or anything's different or anything that would even become close to this imminent threat. And so it's no wonder, again, that the FDD has something entirely different. And of course, who do you think that Trump was listening to? Witkoff, Kushner, and he was probably getting intelligence reports. Witkoff was, honestly, I would imagine Witkoff was probably, culminating and pulling together reports and information from people like this Israeli think tank, the FDD. But not surprising at all. And if anything, I think it's just more another data point, if you will, in a long line of argumentation of why this nation's owned and operated by Israel. Now, it was CBS that reported earlier today, and this was the big one that was being floated around, and even more reason why I think that there is going to be an imminent ground invasion, like I'd pointed to earlier. So CBS is reporting that the United States is preparing plans for sending ground troops into Iran, but they also add the tagline that no final decision has yet been made. And so we have a bit of the details here, and this is published by the Kubesi letter, in addition to the CBS report that was out earlier today. And what they have here is senior military commanders have sent Trump specific requests aimed at preparing for a ground invasion. Number 2 says that Trump has been deliberating whether to position ground forces in the region. Number three, is that the U.S. has held meetings to prepare for how to handle the possible detention of Iranian soldiers and paramilitary operatives, like I had said earlier, figuring out where to place these Iranians. And number 4, the U.S. is preparing to deploy elements of the 82nd Airborne Division into the Middle East region. It's going to be another busy weekend ahead. And so I think all data is pointing to, all the reports, all of the media is actually pointing to there being a clear and obvious ground attempt. And one of the things that and I'll reference Nick again, because this is where I heard it from, but it does make a bit of sense, is the idea around this seizure of Karg Island. And very specifically, I think he was going so far as to make the point, well, would they be so slimy, so swarmy to politicize this to the degree that they would say, well, no, we didn't put boots on the ground in Iran. We just had people on the islands around Iran, right? We just had people on the islands, near Karg Island. We just had them positioned really close. They weren't technically in Iran. See, Iran's border's right here, and they were like 2 feet away over there. And so again, maybe they will find any other kind of way to really kind of defend themselves in the politicized nature of the way that the media would report on it. One other thing I noticed, but I didn't corroborate for, but I'll just, again, drop off to you guys. So in case you want to look up more about this, so just take this with a grain of salt. I didn't corroborate it beyond just seeing Chief Trumpster post about it. But ABC News is reporting that unknown drones were flying over military bases on U.S. soil. I believe this was in Louisiana, which I believe very specifically is one of our nuclear military bases, I might add. And another report also that came out of ABC later on thereafter as well, too, is that they're reporting that at least 232 U.S. troops have been wounded, the majority of which have traumatic brain injuries. So I think there is going to be, again, a bit more of this kind of discernment needed to be used of who do you trust? What do you make of these numbers? Will you trust what the White House says? Will you trust what Fox News says? Or are you going to use your intuition? Or are you going to take the in-between, which I think is probably the smart route, right? If Iran says 300 and the U.S. says 100, I'm going to go with 200 because that's probably the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. But again, with the drone report flying over, I will take it to you. I'm going to just put this up on screen so you guys can see this. And again, with a grain of salt, please take this with a grain of salt. I've not seen anything beyond just these posts on X about this, but it did catch my attention. And what they say, and this is from ABC News, says between March 9th and 15th, 2026, the BAFB security forces observed multiple waves of 12 to 15 drones operating over sensitive areas of the installation, including the flight line, with aircraft displaying non-commercial signal characteristics, long-range control links, and resistance to jamming. The document said after reaching multiple points across the installation, the drones dispersed across sensitive locations on the base. And then it finishes by saying that the flights lasted around 4 hours each day, and the drones used varied routes of ingress and deliberate maneuvering within restricted airspace. And what I may add to this very intentionally is the reason why it highlights that resistance to jamming is because that seemed to be the biggest, the takeaway here, which was that the drones were flying around the base and there seemed to be nothing that we could do to stop them. And at a certain point, you do it does beg the question, when do you just fire on them? Like, if you can't take them down in any other way, why would you just let them sit up there? It reminded me a little bit of the hot air balloon during Biden's tenure, where it's like the entire nation was like, why are we not shooting it down? As it like just traveled across, the land, taking whatever data, from China or whatever they were trying to, grab their intelligence reports about. It reminded me of that. So it is a bit curious. I guess I just look at that story with a bit of a watchful eye, if you will, because I just don't understand the reasoning why, if it's been doing it consistently for day in and day out, why it would have been on the third day they're still letting it fly around. To me, at that point, it's like we're just shooting these things down, asking questions later. But maybe that's just me. Maybe that's why I'm not in the military. And more from top of the hour, again, like I'd mentioned, Georgia did become the first United States state. Shouldn't even have to say it like that. It's just the way I wrote it for some reason. They suspended fuel taxes, obviously because of the Middle Eastern war, or the Iranian war, I should say. There was also reports that came out earlier. I don't think I've seen this occurring yet, but the Iranian foreign minister, Araghchi, said that he has intelligence indicating Israel is planning a strike. So not just any strike, but a strike on the infrastructure. What very specifically, the energy infrastructure, but very specifically that we have all seen Joe Kent say that would be, an escalation, that Trump has said that was the one thing that Trump would come out of the woodwork to say, we're not going to let Israel do. So this is curious what may happen if Israel does go out and beyond. And I may add too, one thing I forgot to cover yesterday is in addition to obviously the Netanyahu bit where he literally blasphemes Christ, but later on, it was towards the end of that press conference, one of the things, he's asked this question very specifically, where the reporter says, if the United States chooses to no longer continue its campaign against Iran, would you and could you continue this war? And he doesn't answer the question. Actually, he doesn't even say anything. It's one of his press people shuts the reporter down and says, no, we're not taking any more questions. For Netanyahu to smirk, look at the reporter, and he says, you've exhausted all your questions, before he walks off. So that was a bit concerning, but I think we all kind of already know the answer. Netanyahu more than likely will do anything in his power to maintain and continue the operation. So I do believe that they see this as a ticking time bomb. And again, a lot of this because of the reasoning that there's going to be in about 10 to 15 years, if all things remain the same, there will be no grassroots support for Israel from the people of America. As the boomers die out, so does the support for Israel. And so I think it's inside of that, they are making some calculations of what their strategy may be and what their timeline actually looks like to achieve the objectives they want while they have, United States footing the bill, if you will. And we did cover the foyer as well. I feel like I probably covered that pretty solidly, to be honest with you. But again, that's going to be for today, that's going to be one of the more major pressures that's escalating the oil prices as well. It is unfortunate seeing people have to pay $6 a gallon for diesel gas. And then I think in some areas, it's like as expensive as $8.19. I'm unsure where that may be. And I'm sure different states are being hit harder than other areas, I would imagine. Now, in terms of Pete Hegseth has this moment where he announces a reinstatement and return to service. I'm just going to put this up on screen and let you guys see it in case you've not seen this as well. But the top comment says, sounds like this war is going to last a lot longer than a couple of weeks. I put this up on screen for everybody to see here. But you can see this here, a quotation, we are extending the department's reinstatement and return to service guidance by an additional year, allowing our warriors of conscience to return through April 1st, 2027. And many people are taking this as an obvious sign or another channel to open up to allow for more bodies, more warm bodies to walk into the military industrial complex. And so here's Pete Hegseth. I'll let you take a listen to it.
Today in this video, as we said we would, I want to update you on our efforts to reinstate those service members who were unjustly forced out of the military during the COVID-19 panic. While I'm proud of our efforts over the past year, our obligations to make things right are not yet complete. I'm therefore extending the application of the department's reinstatement and return to service guidance established last April. The revised guidance will now apply to former service members, our warriors of conscience, who wish to return to service through April 1st of 2027. So we're extending this to make sure anybody that wants to take advantage of it has additional time to take advantage of it. Maybe you were waiting to see whether we meant it or not. We do. We hope you'll take a look.
So that's kind of the main point through there. Now, obviously, it kind of gives a bit more details of like how that extends to, and a few more, quotes about, COVID and whatnot. And this wasn't the only other terrible thing that he said, or idiotic thing I think that he said. I think, just like how Donnybrook put it here, I think that's how most people obviously see this now, is re-enlisting to die for a Jewish war, very specifically. And Zeb's in here, perfect timing. Zeb heard Hegseth call for some more boys to come back to action. He said, come on, get in there. And, and so Hegseth has just been maybe one of the more annoying individuals from the administration. I think he is performing his role well. I think when you look back at some of the previous comments he's made about the Third Temple, I think he might be one of the more degenerate ones, if you will, to be honest with you. And so you see his quotation here, and he's obviously trying to appeal to the good old boys, come back to me, which is just insane. But additionally, there was another moment, which we'll take a look at too, but he has a moment in one of these other press conferences, which is also crazy too, because there's some details about these press conferences that are a little unnerving as well, but they're shutting him down, shutting it down, if you will. Oh, I got a super chat. Didn't realize that. Thank you very much for super chat. I'll go on, click on it in just a second. But it's this idea that he was pushing that, Iran is, if they would just invest in weapons, forgive me. He says, if Iran would have spent more time investing in their people instead of weapons, like maybe we wouldn't be here. Maybe if they thought about their societies differently. And it's funny because he's doing this in the same speech where he's asking and beginning to, they're beginning to ask for the $200 billion to continue the war. And I think many people may have already seen this too. There's all these different, memes and photos and images coming out that are showing you like what this money could have been spent on. I saw some figures talking about how like, I think it was like 2.7 million families could have been added to Medicaid, or like, you could have fed this many people. And it's just like, this is what the American people, this is the perspective of the American people as well. They're looking at Hegseth the same way. And it's like, how ironic, or how hypocritical really, I should say, that you would demean the Iranian people for doing what they're doing. And here's the thing, and here's the kicker. The Iranian people actually get props for this because they took the Greater Israel Project as fact, and they are benefiting for it. Had they sat here and believed everything that Trump said and every one of these boomers believes, I mean, the war would already be over and we would have dominated them at this point. The regime would have been changed. So I think there's something to that, to be honest with you. But to go up to the super chat here, let me grab this real quick. Oh, he says, Skeet Hegseth. That's funny. And true. And I think I saw a hilarious comment in the Discord earlier today, which if you do scroll fast enough in one of these photos, it does literally look like Hegseth has cornrows, which is just kind of funny. But again, this is kind of his appeal, right? He's like the young shot. He's like the young cowboy. He kind of, to me, he kind of does represent like the CIA cowboy a little bit, right? The, it's fine if America does it type morality. That's kind of the vibe I get from Hegseth. And I think for some people, a bit more of the MAGA cult-minded, the lower than 100 IQ individuals, I should say. I think they very specifically are, what's the word? Hypnotized by Hegseth's charisma, which, if you could even call it that. Zeb says he's got something for Hegseth. That's funny. Uncle House says that in August 2018, a Qatar-linked investment fund through Brookfield Asset Management provided a $1.1 billion rescue deal for 666 Fifth Avenue, easing the Kushner family's financial burden. That's crazy. And speaking of, too, for people who also want to, want to follow the money a little bit better as well, there was a great article that did take a look at Witkoff and Kushner too, I believe, that House Leotardo posted in the Discord and hashtag tinfoilhat.com. If you guys wanted to take a look deeper into that article, I didn't get a chance to go deeper into it. I took a brief look at it. It looked pretty solid. And people are washing fish tank. That's funny. Yeah, but Hegseth obviously making himself a fool. We don't really need to play the secondary one. Just know that he's accusing the Iranian people for what he is himself is doing. Major hypocritical moment. The one I want to actually get to and be a bit more detailed about is the idea that Putin did offer to stop providing intelligence to Iran. And so from what we understand, Politico did reject this. Politico rejected it. The United States rejected it per Politico. And the name of the envoy, the Russian envoy, is Kirill Dmitriev. And so supposedly he's been having continual meetings with both Witkoff and Jared Kushner. And they're happening in Miami. Once again, here we are in Florida. South Florida specifically seemingly has an extremely high concentration of Jewish individuals. Seems like Florida is very, very controlled out of all of the 50 states, especially if you look at deep dive into Ron DeSantis and other elements from there. But beyond that, again, these European diplomats are worrying that Moscow is trying to drive a wedge between Europe and the United States at a very critical moment. And again, to reference Trump lambasting all the NATO allies for being cowards for refusing to send warships in to assist. Sam Hyde is actually 5'6". That's funny. That's hilarious. But isn't it Sam Hyde like 6'6" or something like that? I feel like he's like a massive guy. He like sits at 280 like naturally. It's kind of crazy. However, one official was quoted as calling the Russian proposal outrageous, which again is fueling suspicion that the Witkoff-Dmitriev meetings are not delivering any kind of peace progress, but is something else going on. Are they saying that these meetings are about this X, Y, and Z, but really they're about something else? And so now people are kind of beginning to fear this because of how frequent these meetings are happening, yet it seems like nothing's coming of them. And so again, I think they are looking at this with a watchful eye, and I think they should be. And again, Politico notes that I think many of them are looking at this with the idea in mind that the U.S.-mediated Ukraine peace deal talks are also on hold for what's happening in the Middle East. Again, America making its own priorities heard. And the thing I guess I would end on with that I think I found very particularly interesting is that it wasn't the only proposal that was supposedly reported that Russia has made, going back to, again, one of them being that they were offering to hold Iran's enriched uranium as maybe a potential way to de-escalate or find a way to have a ceasefire. Now, they detailed a little bit about the information that was shared, and so far it's really just satellite imagery as well as like drone technology that is being shared between Russia and Iran. I would also imagine, though, there's a potential for that to escalate too, right? If there's only doing maybe these couple sources of intel, Russia may also be able to start providing further intelligence, maybe other kind of reports that may be falling out of my purview right now, militarily. And that's kind of the idea with what's happening, really right now in the kind of the global sphere. There's a lot of other smaller stories that's been happening. Lauren Boebert came out and made public statements against Trump, wants people to vote no to the war efforts. Maybe not specifically against Trump, but maybe more so against the war. And you also have that Iran's additionally warning that any park, tourist site, and rec area is not safe, open for strikes. And all this speaks to the opposite of what Trump has said, which is these things are winding down. And so again, very confusing. But I am already beginning to run out of time. And like I said, I'm gonna be shorter today. I still have another 20, 30, 40 minutes or so. I'll be able to give you guys, just want to let you know, I might be a bit shorter. But two things I want to focus on very specifically while I do have the time. The first one is the Joe Kent media circus, or the media circuit, if you will. And so you have Joe Kent being on, obviously, Tucker Carlson, that happened a day or two ago. But you have Joe Kent with Megyn Kelly, you have Joe Kent with Scott Horton, and then you have Joe Kent on Breaking Points. And I think three of them, there's a something to grab, I think, from each of them, though the Megyn Kelly one I found very specifically interesting. You also have Professor Zhang, of all people, right, as me and Zeb had covered before, as a potential impossible, perhaps this also nebulous, perhaps, he's obviously this resistance liberal kind of person, but he's clearly this, Professor Zhang is not organic, right? I think we can at the base level say, at least his promotion's not organic. He himself might be organic, but his promotion and being brought around everywhere seemingly is being boosted by all the wrong people. And who was he on with earlier today? Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson and Professor Zhang sat down together. And so now I think you need to look at this I would be looking at Professor Zhang with a watchful eye as well, being someone who might be attached to this this group, this PayPal mafia, this Russian aligned network of individuals that seemingly is not attached to the Israeli network, but is attached to something else that also wants to vie for control. This other faction that has its hands upon people like David Sachs, as well as JD Vance, as well as Peter Thiel. And so now I think Peter Thiel may be, and again, I think a lot of this is you can just kind of see if you pay attention to a little bit of these subtleties. But to go to Joe Kent very specifically, I'll start with the first one. I think what's the big one is Joe Kent and Megyn Kelly. One of the clips that was floating around is him detailing his relationship with Vance and Tulsi Gabbard. But in the broader space, he was saying more so specifically, he was kind of providing cover for them. He was saying, Tulsi and JD are in such a bad spot. And this is falling in line with what Nick had proposed with when he was theorizing, what is Joe Kent's role in all of this? Why the move now? What is going on? What is this operation? And so in that light, right, and in my theory as well too, and I agree with Nick, is Joe breaking away? Is Tucker providing the pillow and Joe is opening the lane to provide an option for people like JD Vance and others who don't want their entire chances for the future administrations and future presidencies burned completely to begin separating themselves from the Trump administration. And again, based off the very base and I think kind of commonsensical idea, which is if everyone on planet Earth, including everyone in America right now, besides those who are in the cult of MAGA, do not want the Iran war and are just angry at the mass betrayal. I mean, we're not even going to be able to touch on mass deportations and how much of a failure that is. But that's another big story. Obviously, the mass deportations are over. Tom Homan's now overseeing a change of mass deportations to what he called like bread and butter deportations or criminal deportations. And so if you're someone like JD Vance, how do you begin your campaign in 2028 and say, hey guys, you want more of what you just had? Nobody wants that. And so it's in this kind of in this light that we're thinking, what's JD Vance going to do? Clearly he wants to be president. He wanted to be president before he was even attached to Trump. He's clearly had, it's been like a 10 or 12 year plan now for him, if not a bit longer. So what's the move from JD? And I think we're seeing a bit of that. And again, Joe Kent providing cover for both JD Vance and Tulsi. And I think at a certain point, I believe it was also providing cover for Scott Bessent, which I found was a bit interesting too. And let me find the specific one. It was on Breaking Points that he defended Scott Bessent as well. And the one on Breaking Points, we won't be able to watch the clip of, but I will describe briefly. I forget the guy's name. It's the Indian or Arab guy, whatever it is. He's just not the white guy. And I don't mean that to be rude by any means. It's just like I literally don't know what his name is, and it's a very foreign name. But the guy from Breaking Points, the clip that's circulating that's showing the defense of Scott Bessent is in line with what Joe Kent was saying. And so if you've been following some of the top criticisms of the top of the MAGA brass against Joe Kent, what they've been saying is, despite him being director of, or the former director of counterterrorism, what they've been pushing is that he might have had that role, but he was kept out of the briefings. So then what Joe Kent had said earlier today was that it wasn't just that he was kept out of these briefings, it was that JD Vance and Scott Bessent were also relegated. So Scott Bessent, he also made the point that JD Vance and Scott Bessent, along with him, and I think he also made mention of Tulsi Gabbard here too, instead of being invited to these, these separate Mar-a-Lago, situation room things, they were kept sitting in the White House Situation Room. And so there's this break of strategy. And so it looked like that Trump was hosting much more personal. So obviously the administration's a circle, but if you listen to Joe Kent, clearly there was an even smaller circle that he wasn't a part of. And so he also throws in the names JD Vance and Scott Bessent as people who were also kept out of this smaller circle from Trump. But going back to the Megyn Kelly one, the way he details his relationship with Vance and Tulsi, I find it to be a bit odd. And very specifically in the aspect that he didn't resign the typical way, which he even admits to, because as someone in his position, being confirmed into his position from the administration, the typical process is that his resignation goes straight to the president. That's how it's supposed to work. But that's not how it happened, actually. The way he retells it is that he actually had a conversation ahead of time with Tulsi Gabbard, let her know so he wasn't blindsiding her. but that it went to JD Vance instead before it was escalated to Trump. And so this is obviously him even admitting to it not being stereotypical process is one thing. But again, it kind of falls in line here that Joe Kent has this tight-knit relationship, if not a partnership with JD Vance. And so he's here because he's on Vance's team, or they're in, or Vance is on their team, however you want to call it. But I'm going to pull this video up. We're not going to watch the whole thing. I watched the whole thing earlier. You know, I can only listen to women speak for so long. I have to be honest with you guys. But it's around here on the 4-minute mark. We're just going to start 4 flat just to be sure, maybe a little bit beforehand just so we can get it. But just take in and absorb the way that he is describing his relationship with JD Vance, because it's obviously going to sound a bit more personal. It's going to sound like the same way he describes his relationship with Tulsi Gabbard, right? I think if you were to look at Joe Kent and Tulsi, you would think that they were, by the way that it's reported and you see these stories dropped off and posited, you would go, okay, these people must clearly be friends even outside of their business relationship. And that seemingly the same kind of sentiment is pushed by Joe Kent here about Vance. And so take a listen to this. Well, or not, I guess. I like how X does this thing.
The president of the United States.
Okay.
And he's been backing, yes, imminent threat. And Tulsi, when at her testimony this week,
What's
said
up, VanDerNoord?
only the president can determine whether there was an imminent threat. But then, of course, went on to say, we assessed Iran was not rebuilding its nuclear enrichment capabilities following the June attack, that they'd been obliterated. So, I mean, I know that you actually, before you resigned to the president, met with Tulsi and you used to work for Tulsi. I mean, you kind of work for her in a way because she's DNI, but I think you were her chief of staff for a time. Am I wrong?
Mm-hmm. I was, yeah. While I was waiting for confirmation from the Senate, I was their chief of staff.
Okay, so you work for Tulsi, and my understanding is you and she went in and you met with Vice President Vance prior to your resignation that you submitted to Trump directly, and I know you spoke to the president too, but can you tell us anything about that? I don't want you to violate, confidences, but can you tell us anything about that meeting with Tulsi and JD?
I think it's better if I don't get into the details. Like I view both of them as very strong leaders, and before I submitted my resignation with Tulsi, as as a Senate confirmed presidential appointee, you have to resign and you technically report directly to the president. But I kind of had a dual track. National Counterterrorism Center falls under ODNI. So Tulsi was my boss day to day. So obviously her and I discussed my resignation ahead of time. I didn't want her to be blindsided. And then the vice president as well, who's been just a personal friend prior to him being the vice president.
So personal friend, right? I think this is obvious now, right? They clearly are like friends, at least on something beyond an acquaintance level. And you also got to take into effect what he said just before then too, which is while he was waiting to be confirmed, she allowed him to operate as her chief of staff and get cozy here while we're waiting for you to be confirmed. And then the one thing he's unwilling to share details about is the meeting they had about his resignation beforehand. Like what classified information was shared there, right? You're going to get criminal penalties for sharing information about a meeting that you're going to say here later on, like didn't even need to happen because it's not typical. Like that, I think is very curious.
Became the vice president, obviously our relationship changed. But I felt it was proper to at least say to my chain of command, hey, if you guys want me, if you'll give me the opportunity, I will deliver this letter directly to the president of the United States. And so the vice president said, hey, let's sit down, let's chat, and you can deliver the letter to me. And then I got a phone call from the president later on that evening before I resigned. But I don't want to get too much into the details of what we discussed.
Do you think they've been put in a tough spot by all this?
Yes, they've been put in a tough spot, and I know that I put them in a tough spot. And again, that's why I wanted to give them a heads up and just say, hey, I'm resigning. I do plan on making it public. I want to attempt to reach President Trump from the outside to let him know that he still has options and he can. There is a pathway for him to get us off of this trajectory. And also just to thank them for the opportunity to serve once again. But yeah, they're in a hard spot. I mean, they're doing everything I think they can.
So there it is, right? They're doing everything they can. And he says it himself, right? He says that the whole point with a letter, especially because he's being kept out, right? If you've combined the information given between all of these different, comments he's made through these shows, well, if he's being kept out, he's being relegated back with JD and Scott Bessent. They're not even allowed to be in the interior briefings about, the up-to-date and current military strategy. and he has access to all the data, outside of that the public has access to. He says it there himself. He was like, well, I think the only way I can get his attention is by doing this and getting from the outside in, sending it, basically, throwing a rock out at the window, if you will. But what he's doing here is he's, again, pushing this lie that J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard are like non-interventionists, right? Or like they're holding the line, or they're somehow fighting the good fight, which is so odd because if you compare the actions of what Ken has done versus both Vance and Tulsi, it's like it's the night and day difference. And so I guess maybe the point here, and again, J.D. Vance has literally no case at all, right? There's no case for J.D. Vance. And yes, I did see this, JR. We covered it last night because of House. So say thank you to House AI for being up to date. But it's a big joke, right? Like we know that J.D. Vance has been wanting to hit Iran hard, right? This goes back to, again, like I referenced last night, first thing he even says right off the rip of being selected and nominated by Trump to be his VP at the RNC there in 24. Well, he comes right off stage and says, we got to hit him hard. We got to hit him fast. We talked about how in the New York Times talks about how Trump was weighing the odds between a bit of a smaller strike and more of a surgical strike, similar to Midnight Hammer, or going a bit further like J.D. Vance was proposing, which was a bit of a more all-out attack, an all-out maneuver, but just go fast. And here we have Joe Kent. Well, what is he doing? Well, Joe Kent saying, well, they're in tough spots and they're having a hard time. What? This is what J.D. Vance wanted. J.D. Vance wanted an all-out. I mean, I think if anything, right, it's not going nearly as fast, and I think, this is a terrible, terrible decision to be made. And so I think the tough spot, right, that J.D. Vance is in right now is not that he's trying to fight the good fight. The tough spot that J.D. Vance is in, and I think both Tulsi Gabbard is in, is that they are both burning at the, on both ends, their political capital to be running anytime in the future. Tulsi at this point, her career might be over. And then you compare this again, we talked about it in detail yesterday, but not to rehash the entire thing. Tulsi Gabbard straight up just lies while she's being questioned about what her responsibilities are, being the head there of intelligence. Nope, I just, whatever Trump says goes. What? You're the person who's supposed to be presenting these options to him. He doesn't just tell you what is. Like, what are you even doing here? And I think it's like, she's ahead of like 17 different intelligence sources, right? 17 different intelligence agencies, possibly is probably maybe the right way to say that. You don't make assessments. It's like, no, it's retarded. It's like, it's clear and obvious that her main job, and it's in the title too, but her job is specifically to, identify things like threats and trends and all things otherwise that would be very, that would be politically expedient or would be in the interests of the American people or the American nation and for all posterity. And so it just was, and you compare that to like the letter Joe Kent, it's like, well, Joe Kent's letter, like that makes sense if, from what he's saying, but nothing J.D. Vance has done is speaking to that. J.D. Vance is literally talking about how if Kent can't do what Trump wants to do, well, then he needs to be no longer a part of the administration. And so obviously it's a lot of just saying to say stuff because this is just the positions people are in. But it doesn't track. It doesn't make any sense. And I think if anything, the way he has detailed the relationship here with Megyn Kelly harkens back again to everything we know and everything that we are theorizing right now about who Joe Kent is, how close his relationship is to Tucker Carlson being one of the main boosters of J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance being, again, connected to Peter Thiel, very specifically almost at the hip, as well as people like David Sachs. David Sachs also being one of these individuals who about a week and a half ago, also was maybe we pump the brakes now. What's going on? Something is up. Something is clearly up. And Joe Kent also went on with Scott Horton. This one I think had a bit more or less to do with maybe Joe Kent's personal, positioning here. But Scott Horton brought up a leaked report that was published by Politico that the White House had indeed planned on Israel striking Iran first. And quote, more politically expedient. I think this may be a good one to actually take a listen to if you guys haven't seen this one. Scott Horton is somebody who I do appreciate, although I don't agree with on everything at all. I just appreciate anybody who has the stream of consciousness ability, like someone like a Scott Horton, to be able to just rip facts and they have a grasp of history. I like that. I appreciate that. I think that's intelligence, right? Being able to hold that much information, but also not just be able to tell you it happened, but be able to tell you why it happened, when it happened, who it happened to, who did it, all of those things like that stuff to me is the stuff that like, I enjoy. I think that's maybe the white in me where I see, greatness or intelligence. I'm like, I like that. But again, I don't agree with Scott Horton on everything. So here's a clip of this, and I think this will be a bit more poignant to the overall, maybe broad idea here of what's happening here in this country. It's only about a minute long, but I put it on screen for you. It came from Furkan Gökçerka, whatever his name is. I typically don't really trust this account. This account typically always pushes people like Blumenthal, Drop Site News. They push a bit more of these kind of, very clearly financed and not our side individuals. So no matter how much they may say anti-Israel rhetoric, it's also the same point. It's like, why are you saying that? I say it because I'm Christian. They say it because they want their faction to win for power. Anyways, here is this clip here.
I saw this, but there's this interesting article at Politico. This is from the day before the war on Thursday. It says, the White House officials believe that politics are a lot better if Israel strikes Iran first. And this was essentially the idea was an agreement between the Americans and the Israelis to have Israel hit Iran first in order to force Iran to hit America so that they could tell the American people, see, well, they hit us and gave us no choice but to do this. And apparently they decided not to do that. This is very reminiscent, actually, of the David Wurmser plan in 2007, where he and Cheney wanted to get the Ehud Olmert government to attack Iran and force Iran to hit American interests in the Gulf as an end run around W. Bush to force him to do it. In this case, it's Trump and his guys trying to do an end run around us, apparently, or at least that was the idea. But my point being that even though they didn't implement this plan, it seems to put the lie to the idea that Netanyahu is like the snarling pit bull that Trump could not hold on to his leash, rather than they bumped fists and decided to do this together.
So obviously Kim doesn't even speak there. But I think this story in this headline right here is insane. Again, from Politico, White House officials believe, quote, the politics are a lot better if Israel strikes Iran first, which I'm going to be honest, this is like, must be like opposite day, right? It seems like no matter which way you look at it, it feels like every decision made by the administration, every way they've like tried to spin a story, every like little moment has been like they're doing the opposite of what would be like good optics, if you will. I think if anything, if it was America that went out of their way to strike Iran without Israel, without mentioning Israel, it would have been more politically expedient. It would have not looked like Israel's literally dragging us, into the war. And obviously, this just goes without saying. This is obviously what occurred here. JR, thank you for the super chat. Thank you for everybody who has super chatted. I appreciate it. JR says that it's on can't repudiate the decision to attack Iran, but showers Trump with accolades and makes excuses for his bad decisions, saying he's in danger. And here's another thing too. AF posted this earlier today. And I should have known this. For those who maybe don't know, maybe you do follow AF Post. AF Post is also a little bit subversive on this too. They are a bit more to, maybe not hesitate to say subversive, but they are in this crowd, which is, to criticize what's happening, but also like somehow we're going to avoid talking about Trump in any kind of way. And, the AF Post, what did they say about the mass? It was the mass deportations, actually, forgive me. They had a post earlier today talking about how the mass deportations are effectively over, right? Talking about how Tom Homan's going to be overseeing it. But what they did in the aftermath afterwards was they pinned it on Susie Wiles. At the very end of the post, they put that it was actually Susie Wiles who was in Trump's ear about this. It's like, are you kidding me? Yeah, Susie Wiles is bad. Not to say that let's say that she's not by any means. But to pin this on Susie Wiles is just like we're doing the whole first Trump administration over again, right? It's all the advisors. It's not Trump. It's all these people in his ears. And if we could just get the right people around him, like then it would be different. It's like, are we really doing this all over again? Like Trump didn't learn anything. None of this is from Trump picking and choosing who he's around too. Like, how did Susie Wiles even get there? She just magically spawned in. She spawned on Arc Raiders instead of Speranza. She's in the White House. Like, that's retarded. And so there's a bit of a crowd of people who are doing this, right? Who are trying to separate Trump from being very specifically being criticized for any of these actions here, in the same way that Joe Kent is too. And a little bit of that you could chalk up to the fact that Joe Kent is this man of service. He's a serviceman. He's been in the military for so long, so he wants to be overtly respectful. Sure, you could say that. I think that would be a fair argument to make, that Joe Kent simply wants to maintain his, integrity or honor, if you will. I'll give a Roman. I have no problem with this. Is it with the left hand or right hand? The funniest things is when it's like, it's like they see the range of arms and they're like the acceptable range, and it's like anywhere from here, and it's like, no, you have to stop. And it's like a red area. It's like your arm can be nowhere, in there. I have no problem with that. And it's like me, how could you even say it, right? Like, how could you even say that that's what it was? What if I was like reaching for my camera, right? Like, I think, I don't know, maybe YouTube will be a bit active, who knows? But I just wanted to, again, point the attention to the fact that Joe Kent's obviously doing the media circuit. He's the hot commodity. I would imagine that we might see the Mark Levin and Joe Kent interview sometime soon. I think that would be a cool thing to see. One thing I probably haven't covered at all, really, but I've only seen very little about it, is the I think it was, what was it? It was like the Catholics for America conference, like the big one that was supposed to have like Carrie Prejean Baller at it as well, which I think Joe Kent made an appearance. There's a clip that came out of Joe Kent talking about, not being able to put his hat or his name behind sending more Americans to go die for what he perceived to be a foreign country's interest. I think it was a good thing. It's good rhetoric. Does that mean that the person has our interests in mind? Does that mean the person is our guy? No, not even close. And so we need to maintain these separations here. It can be a good thing, a positive development, and you can be saying all the right things, but that does not always translate into being our guy. If anything, a lot of times it doesn't translate into being our guy. If anything, a lot of times our guys are people who we don't even see until they're already on the scene. They blow up in some kind of way like that. Professor Zhang, also, I want to make mention of that too. Professor Zhang and Tucker were sitting together. Now, what were they talking about? Now, one of the clips that was being pushed by that I saw all over the timeline today was that Professor Zhang was pushing the idea that there will be a draft. And so Zhang says, by the way he looks at it and the information he sees, and given what we already know about the strategic advantages and disadvantages that we have versus what Iran has, and you look at the actual numbers of our military force, our standing army, compared to the numbers that Iran has, it's like, yeah, it looks like we may have to bring in something along the lines of selective service, or there will have to be some kind of extra source we're pulling warm bodies from. And I think that's also when you look at what P. Hegseth that we mentioned earlier, where he's pushing for these people who were kicked out during COVID to return. I think that is one of these channels. I think that's one of these early channels they're trying to get these guys. So, a lot to consider there. Dan Bongino also lied about Charlie Kirk earlier today. I thought that was he's so shameless now at this point. And it was very specific because Joe Kent had made a comment talking about how Charlie Kirk had said something to him in the White House in passing. And I think this was in reference to what Joe Kent said on the Tucker Carlson interview. And I do believe that that's what it was from. And Joe Kent said something, and I'm paraphrasing here, but Joe Kent said something to the effect that while he was walking through the White House, Kirk said something to him like, don't let them go to war with Iran. Something neocons, right? This is what he says. And so Joe Kent just basically repeats it to Tucker Carlson. Well, Dan Bongino comes out and says, well, this is a lie. Like, he says that Joe Kent's a liar and that this didn't happen. And what's crazy is, of all people, it's Brett Weinstein's text messages. He publishes text messages, and it's literally inside of that you can see that Kirk messaging Weinstein back is saying, been at the White House all day trying to prevent war with Iran. It's like, lying on Charlie Kirk this late into the stage after you already have maybe the most humiliating walkout of any official in the last 16 years, maybe besides John Bolton being, excised. This is insane. And I think I saw somewhere that Dan Bongino's about to fall out of the top 100 podcasts in America. Not looking good, brother. Not looking good. And if anything, karma, he deserves every single bit of it. You're going to lie to that pedigree while positioning yourself as being a truth teller, as a fighter. You want to fight for the American people. And then you get into the FBI and you just lie. You lie through your teeth consistently. You lie to defend, the Epstein files, and you lie to defend Jewish interests over American interests. It's like, yeah, you should probably be tried for sedition or treason. I don't even care at this point. I don't even care if it doesn't even make sense. These people are traitors. One other thing too, and again, another one of these more positive developments, and someone to pay attention to, and someone else who's also connected to the CIA, Sean Ryan, on the Sean Ryan show. Sean Ryan hosted Michael L. Lester, or Michael T. Lester, forgive me, and I'm like not familiar with who that is, but what are they talking about on their show today? I'll pull it up just so you guys can see it. Well, they're entertaining and they're talking and going on a deep dive about the USS Liberty. So now here we have another former CIA contractor, now alongside Tucker Carlson, now being very heavily against the Trump administration, now also hosting people who are talking, about the USS Liberty. So imagine that. And so not to really play it at all, because I think Sean Ryan will copyright me, but just to show you, this is what they're talking about. CEO of Ironclad Family Security. I'll have to look into that. I don't know who this individual is, but what they're talking about is the USS Liberty. I guess there's no captions here. You can just read it right here at the top. You can read this last line. It was the one and only time in history that another country has directly attacked the United States vessel and there was no repercussions. And so clearly they're covering it in a way that obviously is taking aim at Israel. And again, I would add, on top of that, like most of these places, they always stop just before they actually get to maybe a bit more of what the reality of the situation is. They stop at Israel. They avoid talking about Jews or Jewish or Jewish influence or Judaism or this ethno religion, right? They avoid that. It's like it's Israel's where it stops. It's just like these bad people in this one government here, and has nothing to do with their identity. Which I think is, again, I think that's a really, really poor way, and it's an extreme reduction. And if anything, points more to them being containment, points more to them of, okay, you can criticize this and this and this, but the buck stops here. It's a very consistent theme with containment. And there's also, this coordinated Zionist propaganda has been all over the internet today too. I'm sure many of you might have seen this if you guys are also on X as well. But it was like Captive Dreamer, Ian Miles Chong, and there's some more people. Will Chamberlain, who's had me blocked for like 5 years now. Dude, that guy is a huge cuck. Like Will Chamberlain is one of the most evil people like on this earth, and I mean that truly. Will Chamberlain always positions himself. He was a Ron DeSantis guy, and never Trumper. He is like Ben Shapiro light, but like with blonde hair, and really have never really liked him or appreciated any of his viewpoints at all. And the fact that he blocked me over a question 5 years ago, before I even got much deep into this, is just like I've always like maybe had a bit of a a nonsensical grudge about that. But like I think he was the first person who had blocked me. Will Chamberlain, WILL Chamberlain. It might even be spelled the same way as Wilt. Yeah, nothing like the big black guy. Nothing like that at all. I'm pretty sure Will Chamberlain's here, let me pull it up. I don't even know if I can pull it up because he has me blocked. Which I didn't even learn. You can't copy the links of people who have blocked you. So like if I wanted to put one of his posts here in my outline, I literally can't. Like if you're blocked, you can't copy the link of their post. Let me see if I can even look him up so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Here he is. It's this guy. What's that, dude? What? You see this? You see this? Like it's just like null. I can't even bookmark it. I can't send it. Nothing. It's trashed, dude. But he is like one of these people as well. And so let me go to this post here, so just so you guys know you're aware of him. Maybe he's a ginger. I don't know. He's got a 5 head. But take a look at this screenshot. Let me get rid of a couple of these as well too. And so there he is. He's the middle one right here. But Ian Miles Chong, Will Chamberlain, Captive Dreamer, and then Sam there as well too. I don't know who the same person is, but what do they all say? They're all repeating the same thing. Anti-Semites are turning me into a Zionist. Their low IQ energy is too much for anyone intelligent to handle. And so that was clearly being pushed out by many of these obviously captured individuals. Tix Bomber says, "Hey, that sold me." Yeah, right. Isn't that the running conspiracy that Tix Bomber is actually Ian Miles Chong? How does AS turn you into a Zionist? Yeah, right. It's because it's all fake. They're trying to push this push. Yeah, more and more boosted, coordinated propaganda. And also, this might be news to you guys as well. but I think I covered it maybe about a week ago or so. And hopefully you guys had seen this because I thought it was just ridiculous. But Laura Loomer has been doing a bunch of like public PR stuff, I guess, in India. For what reason, I literally have no idea. I literally have no idea. But one of the clips that came out about it was this Indian guy got mad because of all of like Laura's previous comments about the people of India, and he was like, "You're a racist. You're a racist to the Indian people, and I do not like it." And it's like, and it's her sitting there. She's like, "I'm so sorry. I apologize for all my comments." She published this this morning. Take a look at this and try not to vomit in your mouth. She says, honestly, as someone who has traveled a lot, India is the best country I have ever traveled to. I'm not joking. This is real. It's incredible. I will have been here for 9 days when I leave, and there is still so much to see and do. My experience has been amazing, and India is portrayed negatively in the media as a place Americans should avoid. But I realize a lot of that is completely made up. And I'm not going to do the rest of it, but like she's clearly getting paid 2 million views. I don't know how you have 12,000 likes on something like this. Yeah, Laura Lumasar. Yeah, it's just like, yeah, do not redeem. Laura Lomer. Yeah, Larry. Yeah. I think I saw this is going to sound really harsh, but I'm repeating a joke that was made. So everybody, this is not me making the joke. I'm repeating the joke. The quote that I saw that I even saw this post in the first place is that Laura is the only female who can travel to India and not have to fear being raped. That's the joke. That's what I saw. I am just simply saying that as a thing that was said. I am reporting that it was said to you. It is a data point. Now, if you find that funny, I can't control that. I will hold my peace on that one. And another kind of line with this too, I did bring up the Catholic Center, but understand that at the same time, there's another maybe smaller battle occurring. I hate to say smaller battle, but it is, I guess, smaller in scale, I guess, compared to the Iran war, which most people are paying attention to. But beyond that, on the underneath side, I guess if you were to lift up the Iran war and look at the belly underneath, what you would find is that what's happening is there's a full-out anti-Christian war being waged by Zionists. There has been article after article being published by individuals with big accounts that have been, that are boosted by people like Elon Musk, Insurrection Barbie being one of them. One of them is very extremely anti-Catholic. A lot of these pushes are very specific to promote Zionism and to be against covenant theology, or they use their pejorative, which is the replacement theology. So these things you need to be paying attention to. This would normally be a community submission, so credit goes to the House for pushing this to my attention too. But I'd also seen a couple other things I was looking at as well. But Ted Cruz being one of these individuals who's boosting this, he has been, right? Ted Cruz took his 11 lashings from Tucker Carlson when when push came to shove, he couldn't defend his Zionist beliefs. And it's coming from Insurrection Barbie. There's also one from Drunk Republican as well, who's a Zionist. They're also pushing these ideas of like, what if it's not actually Israel, but it's like this other thing, and it's just such a joke. It is just such a joke to even have to pay attention to. And now he's posting filtered baby videos. No joke. I ran across this earlier today. This is insane. And I had the exact same reaction as Ecorca, which is literally, what the F are you doing? And this is what Ted Cruz is doing now. I'll spare you the audio. But this is what we're doing. This is how Ted Cruz is fighting the fight. And so I guess if that makes sense to him, maybe this is the way that baby boomers communicate to each other. Maybe he's just given up on trying to reach anybody under the age of 45. Kind of crazy. Look, 2.1 million views. And again, it blows me away that this has more than 100 likes on it. Who follows these people? I have no idea. I literally have no idea. It is, right? This is like, that is very boomer, right? This is what will get shared on Facebook. They'll find it funny, surely. But I think that probably will be where I'll spend some time at, I think, next week. And maybe if not over the weekend as well, too, is taking a bit of a deeper dive into this kind of war that's going on between the Zionists in this country versus the Christians. I mean, and that's just what it is. I'm sorry. Like, I think saying Christian Zionist is a joke. I really do. I think you can either be a Zionist or you can be a Christian, if you're asking me. And I think many people would share the same opinion as I. And that kind of wraps up. I get maybe on a more shallow side. I apologize for not going as deep as I did yesterday. Pause. But those are some of the things I wanted to make sure I covered. And again, I want to go back to the themes here, to kind of make everything come full circle, really, which again is that Trump is the problem, but maybe more so and maybe less concerning about just pointing fingers of who is to blame here is the idea that we need Trump we need the MAGA, we need this done and away with, right? We need the MAGA, we need the America First takeover of MAGA. We need MAGA to be just, find its way. I think as Nick said, it needs to leave center stage. We need to, it needs to exit the stage. Not by any nefarious means, but by just, falling away, falling out of popularity, or quite literally just dying with this administration because it's already been, exposed as the scam that it is. And secondarily would be that the fact that there seemingly is no strategy. And I think more so than what it just implies for us to sit there and point fingers again at like, haha, look at these idiots, bumbling and stumbling, is the fact that if that is the truth, then the chances of there being very negative consequences and long-term negative consequences for you and I and the people at home watching this is high. And I think that is something that people need to be taking very seriously, right? It might be a ha-ha moment here and there of like, here's the administration doing this and this, or like, yeah, who could have guessed it? The Jews are doing this again, right? But more beyond that, I would say, it's the idea that you should also be preparing for what that may look like for you as an individual trying to take care of your family. I think maybe some calculations need to be made moving forward about what you need to be doing, to long term to better protect yourself from that. And then off of that, one of those being, again, oil prices having the potential to hit $200 a barrel. And so understand, if gas was around, high threes or, around the $3 range when it was at 70 to 73 a barrel, well, at 140, you would be expecting around 6 or 7. But if they're saying it could go to 200, I mean, now we're entertaining the idea of some states having like $10 gas. That's insane. And I don't think America is quite in any position really to take that on, especially when you look at the financial data for people like who are living paycheck to paycheck, the amount of debt to income ratio. I mean, all of it, right? All the people who are, being choked out by certain rent controls, things like that, that $10 gas, I don't know how people are going to be able to contend with that. I guess for me, it's like one of the few things that actually might not affect me because I don't drive that much anymore. But obviously, the thing is, too, to take into account with oil prices as they increase, everything else does too. And the reason why, and hopefully many of you, hopefully I would imagine many of you already understand this, but for those who don't, oil inflects everything. When oil goes up, everything goes up. For the most part, there are some categories that aren't touched. But the reason why is because, well, for most products, they need to be transported, right? For most products, they need to, they don't spawn in the grocery store, right? The bread doesn't simply spawn behind the next one. There's no infinite bread button. This isn't like the horror game where like you just show up on your 5 a.m. shift and everything's already there. Like, no, it's like the reason why is because it would affect transportation costs. And just like you have to get to work, the same thing is true of the semi that loads up all the product. It increased their transportation costs. And so there's all of these, different reasons of why categorically it will affect everything. So it's not just going to be that your gas price will go up. It'll be that your food costs will go up, your grocery costs will go up, and anything else that will fall upon or be heavily reliant upon a longer kind of supply chain or a transportation chain is also going to be affected too. And I think therein, you would probably be better off thinking about that now before you go to the gas station and you see the $10 price tag sticking out at you. But again, that's all I kind of had for today. I'm going to go ahead and take it easy. I'm kind of gassed anyways, and I literally think I'm getting sick, so that's just lovely. As soon as the weekend hits, I'm dying. But again, I want to rehash a couple of the announcements. Again, thank you to the sponsor, Athenor Metallurgy. That is AthenorLLC.com. If you guys want to check any of their products out or file in a custom order, they do custom stuff as well. I think they are waiting for some more pieces to be moved before they get to a better position. So I guess maybe that'd be the communications you'd have to have. But I do know that they do have a Their portal is up and online, but I think there's a bit more time that they need before to get the whole production up and running. But again, thank you to them for even allowing me to to sponsor the show. In addition to that too, oh yes, rest in peace Chuck Norris. I completely forgot to mention that at the beginning. But yeah, I did see that. It's very sad. This is a man who I had posters all over my wall growing up. I can read off, it's been a while since I could, but I used to be able to rip Chuck Norris jokes like off the dome. I couldn't freestyle, but as a white man, I could tell you Chuck Norris jokes like crazy. And, RIP to him. And there's already been some political stories about him. Like, we would be mourning Chuck Norris, but his political views made us rethink that. It's like, who the hell are you? Wow. He was a conservative. Now we can't even mourn the dead. It's just so ridiculous because people are depraved. And again, you don't hate journalists enough, but I think everybody already knows that. But tomorrow, group report tomorrow, me and Josh should be, as long as Josh shows up, as long as I don't die of some kind of crazy sickness. And as long as I'm healthy enough, I'll be there too. Atlas Thug TV is also incoming as well. I'm going to remind you of that. I'm probably just going to start very similar to you see how Asmongold's channel is set up on YouTube. That's how I'm probably going to set up the secondary channel, to be honest with you. So that'll be anything from I'm just going to start covering a lot more. I cover politics, but I like to open and entertain other things as well too. That doesn't mean any of this is going away, but clips from the stream may also end up on there too for people who don't want to watch a whole hour and whatnot thing. Maybe they just want to hear about the Iraqi oil force manure, right? Maybe they just want to hear about, Ted Cruz or something along that lines. I'm going to start separating up some of the content a bit more and publishing it on Atlas Thug TV. And then in addition to that, I probably will bring back a couple of the other fun stuff that we were doing before politics kind of got out of hand as well. No OnlyFans is incoming. No. So that may include things like, one of the ideas I had was a lot more of the scary stuff we were doing. We'll see how well that is. Whether it's scary streams or scary games, I do just appreciate the genre of horror and doing indie games and things like that too. So we'll see. But just a side hustle project coming in on the back end for me, and just to proliferate myself, I guess, a little bit more too. And for next week specifically, there will be more videos. I'm going to be up ramping the production again. I need to catch up to where I was at last month, so expect probably less streams in general, just because I'll be spending more time scripting out videos and then actually editing them and putting them together. Because again, it's all me. There's no team. I don't have anybody. I have no person I can say, hey, can you do this for me? I mean, I probably could, but I'm a control freak like that, I guess. So with that, I appreciate everybody for being here. As always, appreciate seeing all the regulars too, all the mods. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. And we're going to keep pushing. And if anything, there may be a chance I stream tomorrow too before Group Report, but don't hold me to that. Just depends on what the day looks like for me. But with that, as always, Christ is King. Seek first the kingdom of God. There's quite literally nothing more important. There's nothing more important than seeking Jesus Christ, especially if you feel like your relationship with him or with Christianity at all is on rocks or is on shifting sands. There's nothing more important. And again, that call supersedes the call to family. That call supersedes the call to your wife, the call to your children, the call to your parents. You are to honor and serve your Lord, your God above everything, period. And so I think there's some truth in that. And I think some of you maybe you are in a situation where you feel like you're having to pick and choose between that. But as always, make sure that you seek that first, above everything. And so with that, deport Kash Patel, deport Pam Bondi, impeach the entire administration. These people need to go to jail. They are all traitors and they need to be treated as such. And for the women who are over 150 pounds, you're going to be deported. And for any woman between 100 and 150, this is your 90-day notice. You have to lose the weight. If not, we will be shooting you from Canaan to Israel. With that, I appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out and have a good night. Take care.
Get up and get out. Get out. Get out. I have a question for you.
Say Christ is Lord. Say Christ is Lord. Say it. You say Christ is Lord. Get out. Get out. Christ